The up and down roller coaster that has been the Chicago Bears season this year was at a 5 week low point over the past 5 weeks, as even though they had a bye week, they were winless in their 4 games, and there were a lot of questions surrounding the quarterback position as well as many other people around the team. I'm sure going into last night's key divisional battle against the Green Bay Packers that Mitchell Trubisky and the rest of the Chicago Bears were ready to put those rumors to rest and start their season back on the right track with a win against a key divisional opponent. And instead of being a competitive game, the Green Bay Packers quickly dispatched the Bears, and going into the fourth quarter, the lead for the Packers was 41-10. David Montgomery had over 100 yards rushing, and Allen Robinson grabbed 2 touchdowns out of the air. However, the Chicago Bears as a whole entire unit did not get anything going until the fourth quarter, and by the time they actually started putting points up on the board in the second half, it was much too late to even try to think about mounting a comeback. To me, the worst part for the Bears and their fans is that Mitchell Trubisky was the guy that everybody wanted to see, whether you were a Bears fan or just a fan of the league in general. Everybody was wanting to see Mitchell Trubisky back in the lineup because of Nick Foles' inconsistencies. However, Mitchell Trubisky showed pretty much the same exact inconsistencies that got him benched in the first place, and now it has people wondering why they wanted to see him back in the starting lineup. However, even though some of the players didn't play up to expectations for this Green Bay game, the coaching staff was its usual inept, as when asked about a Mitchell Trubisky interception in which Trubisky tried to fit the ball somehow in between 2 over-the-top safeties, Matt Nagy basically said, "We're not upset with Trubisky's INT because we knew we were taking a shot deep to the end zone." In a game in which you have only scored 3 points up to the point of the interception and your defense has given up 14 in 2 drives, I think you should be upset with your quarterback throwing an interception because your defense has shown that they can't really stop the other team's offense, and so far your offense hasn't even been able to keep up with its current amount of possessions. So just throwing away a possession because you're taking a shot doesn't necessarily I don't necessarily think that's the smartest thing to say, and it's definitely not the smartest thing to do, obviously, as it led to a 30-point blowout. Now, for me, and I think for Bears fans at this point, this needs to be the final game of this era that the Chicago Bears are in, with Ryan Pace, with Matt Nagy, with Mitchell Trubisky, with basically every player that is on the roster that the Chicago Bears think are necessary for a championship. Because at this point, they have nowhere near the pieces necessary to win a championship. They can't even win their own division or win divisional key games. So at this point, they need to pull the same move that the 2018 Dolphins did after the season, and that's completely blow the team up, get as many draft picks for this current team that you can, and try again in a few years, because at this point, your team cannot and will not win a championship in its current state. What sucks for the Bears is that they have a lot of talented pieces at a lot of key positions. They've probably got a top 10 wide receiver in Allen Robinson. Their tight end group has come together solidly, and they've got some key players on the defensive side of the ball, namely Roquan Smith, Eddie Jackson, and Kyle Fuller, and Khalil Mack, that a squad with this many guys to it should be a team that is in the top of the league. At this point, I think every single member of the Chicago Bears squad should be on the hot seat. And with a game like last night's where they just get completely destroyed by the Green Bay Packers, it's one of those games where I think many people are waking up the next day not knowing whether or not they're going to have their current job as a starter, as a backup, as a coach, assistant, or front office personnel piece. This is the kind of game that makes people think whether or not they're going to have a job tomorrow. And even Mitchell Trubisky said last night after the loss that he doesn't even know if he's going to be the starting quarterback next week due to his lackluster play. And for a guy who's just coming off of the injured reserve because of a shoulder injury, and a guy that we didn't necessarily think had great confidence to begin with, him saying that just confirms that this team needs to disassemble from the top end down and reestablish what kind of culture they need to instigate. The Bears obviously can't hit their reset button right now as they're in the middle of the season, and with the current climate going on in the country today in terms of sports, it's probably not a great move for them to try to figure out their going on winning culture with everything going on. However, the first key steps in terms of getting their proper culture aligned in the Chicago franchise is moving on from Ryan Pace as the GM and moving on from Matt Nagy as the play calling head coach, who sometimes gives up play calling duties, sometimes keeps them, doesn't really know what to do head coach. In terms of the perfect replacement for Matt Nagy in the Chicago Bears organization as the head coach, to me is current San Francisco 49ers defensive coordinator Robert Saleh. I think I don't know what it is, he gives me a Pete Carroll vibe in terms of being able to get the most out of his players and not be something that is looked at as the reason the team might be losing. I think anytime, somebody looks at the Seattle Seahawks right now and they see a team that's, winning, or they see a team that is playing hard, the first thing that many people point to is the type of, vibe that Pete Carroll sets for his team, the type of ability to get his players hyped and be able to get the most out of his guys when it comes to game day. I think Robert Saleh has that same kind of energy and vibe to him, and somebody with that type of feeling would be a perfect replacement for a head coach that just doesn't seem to know what he's doing at times. Now, obviously, I don't know what the GM replacement for Ryan Pace would be, but I think I could honestly say that if the Bears hired me tomorrow as their GM, I could do a far better job than what Ryan Pace has put on the table for the past 5 to 6 years stretch for the Bears. But that's just going to show that how bad of a job Ryan Pace has done. I'm in no way saying I'm a general manager, but Ryan Pace, what he did/didn't do for the Bears as the general manager, it goes to show just how bad, if your front office is not great at the very top tier, then the rest of your team is going to be in shambles within a 5 to 6 years stretch. And that's what we're seeing right now with the Bears on the field. And in terms of the players on the roster, getting rid of some of these guys that are actually able to compete for a championship at their current spot. Allen Robinson is a very good, very established number one wide receiver in this league. There's guys on the defensive side of the ball, like Eddie Jackson's one of the best ball-hawking safeties in the league. Kyle Fuller is one of the great corners in the league. Roquan Smith is a great young linebacker. Khalil Mack is a still ascending, very, very talented player in this league. They've got some really good guys on this roster, but as we've seen the past 2 or 3 years now, as it's currently constructed, it can get you nowhere near even sniffing a Super Bowl. And they're scratching and clawing, trying to get to the playoffs. And this game tonight, or I guess I should say last night, the game last night was supposed to be a telltale sign of whether or not Chicago could get back to the top of the division. And obviously they cannot, based off what happened last night. And, they kind of just landed in a bunch of mud. And the best way to clean themselves off is get rid of everything that's making them dirty right now. And that is their head coach, their GM, and their lackluster roster. With all that being said, that's going to be the video for me. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, make sure you hit the like button. If you didn't, make sure you hit dislike. Any feedback from you all is much appreciated at this point. And if you're a Bears fan or NFL fan, let me know how you feel about the video down in the comment section below. I try to get back to everybody's comment as I can. And I'll see you all in the next video. Peace.